Welcome to our body signals presentation for the month. And like I said, it's one of my favorite because I love talking about diet. As you all know, I love talking about how we can get our bodies to function at their optimum and their best so that our health can be the way that it needs to be. As you guys know, we always talk about just a couple of things. We know that almost all disease comes from really three main subjects, and really the deficiency, so let me talk about those. First, toxicity, deficiency, or nerve interference. When we have one or all of those, then we start having problems and we start getting a dis-ease or a disharmony in our body. Now, if we're deficient in vitamin C, we all know that we can get scurvy, right? This happened with people who were coming over on boats and they didn't have any vitamin C. They found this out. This was causing skeletal changes, but toxicity is something that is seeping into our world, literally seeping into our world. And so I think it's an important thing for us all to understand how to avoid toxicity and how to make sure that our body is functioning at its best. Now, true detox occurs at the cellular level. And today we're going to be talking a little bit about true detox. We're also going to be talking about cleanses, and we're going to be talking about strategies that you can do each and every day to make sure that you are getting healthier and a little bit stronger. Sorry for this lighting issue with my face, but I'll keep you guys focused on the screen anyhow. So let's dive right in. We want to understand how our bodies are able to detox on a regular basis. So this is what we're going to be going over in a synopsis. We're going to be going over chronic diseases on the rise, cleansing versus detox, the 10 most common toxins, and the common disorders that come from them, okay? So again, if you guys have any questions, then please jump in and let me know what those are. So let's dive right into the content. So chronic diseases are rising, right? Things like asthma, cancer, fatigue, chronic viral infections, autoimmune diseases, autism, depression, mental, emotional disorders, all these things are having a major rise, right? High blood pressure, low blood pressure, digestive problems, weight loss resistance, dizziness, inability to handle stress, exertional malaise, meaning that if you exert, you just start to get super tired, brain fog, fatigue, headaches, hormonal dysregulation, trouble sleeping, depression, unstable moods, temperature dysregulation, muscle and joint pain. The list goes on, right? These are a problem that we're seeing, and they're raising each and every year. One thing that I want you guys to think about is when did you start hearing more about autoimmunity, right? When I was in chiropractic school, 1996 to 2000, we didn't hear about it very much. Yes, we talked about MS and we talked about a few others, but really it wasn't as common. We would see it, very rarely. Now it's a common thing that we hear about all the time. Same thing with autism. We have continually rising rates. So why are we seemingly getting more technologically advanced, but we're not really making any progress in our health? As a matter of fact, our health is continually falling behind. I want you guys to think about those three things that I first talked about: nerve interference, deficiency, and toxicity. Those are the only reasons why we as humans get sick, right? Some people might argue that it could be genetics. And at one point in time, we used to think genetics were 90% of the issue and the environment was 10%. Those have literally been flip-flopped to where we know that if you have a certain genetic disease or genetic predisposition, there's something called epigenetics. And epigenetics takes into account your environment, and your environment really dictates how your body is going to react to any of these genes. It's either going to turn on or turn off those genes. So again, that's epigenetics. Completely different topic that we can dive into, and we could spend hours talking about that. And I love that, by the way. But my point of that is that we are continually getting sicker, not because of our genes, but because of our environment. And that's what we're going to dive into and talk a lot more about today. So let's talk about some of these chronic diseases. Where are they coming from? The new normal, right, 75% of American adults over 40 have been diagnosed with at least one chronic disease, right? Diabetes, an epidemic or a plague. 1 in every 3 children born after the year 2000 will have diabetes in his or her lifetime. Now, something that goes along with that is anybody born after the year 2000, it's said by the CDC, will not outlive their parents. And I don't mean outlive their parents, but the number of years. So say that a parent lived to 80, the child is not expected to live to 80. It's the first time in history where the next generation has not been predicted to outlive what their parents were able to live. So there's 300 million people who are affected by depression. There's 60 million people who are affected by bipolar affective disorder. And what we're finding out is that these toxicities are having a major mental component on how our body's able to function and able to work, right? So we've also got on the rise, we've got autism on the rise, right? If the present scale of growth continues at the current pace, by 2032, 1 out of every 2 children in the United States will be on the autism spectrum. Right now, it's 1 in 32, and this is a higher number in boys than it is in girls. These things are a question that we need to start asking, and where are these things coming from? We're going to talk about how some of these heavy metals get passed down to generations that can be affecting these autism rates. Time magazine actually did a full fold on where autism is coming from, exploring mercury, exploring the heavy metal poisoning in our environment. But these numbers are scary, right? Less than a minute from now, right? We know that a person dies from cancer every 54 seconds. The American Cancer Society in 2014 said that in their facts and figures, right? So we know that we're getting sicker, but what do we do about it, and where is this coming from? I believe that one of the issues that's coming up is we have been focusing too much on sick care and not enough on what we do each and every day to help prevent the way that our bodies are going to be able to function at their optimum. Because what I always try and look at is optimum function. How can we create optimum function in the body? What we do every day here at Energize is we work on nerve interference. We work on making sure that the brain-body connection, so the mind-body connection, is working at its optimum by making sure that we restore posture and making sure that the nervous system is functioning at its optimum. We also try and coach people on the basics of what we need to do for nutrition. Last month, we dove deep into that. If you need information, I think we recorded that and you can reach out to us. This month is on toxicity, right? It's on how we detox, how our bodies are able to function. So this is why we're moving in on this. This is where we're really starting to understand what's going on, because what is the #1 cause of all this happening? It's toxins, and I'm not sure how this got messed up like this, but there are many different toxicities that are really continuing to occur, right? What's poisoning us today? They're the top 10. You can see that over here, right in here, we're talking about cosmetics, things that go onto our skin. Did you know that sunscreens are a major cause of toxicity? Because our skin is our biggest organ, and it absorbs very well. It wasn't until last year, November, that the FDA said, hey, we need to take a look at what's going into these sunscreens. Otherwise, they hadn't been changed since they first came on the market in the 1940s, and they hadn't even been held in regulation, right? There's many different exposures. So let's look at what the 10 most common toxicities are, right? So these are pesticides, molds, heavy metals, VOCs. These are volatile organic compounds, chlorine, BPA, oxybenzone, fluoride, parabens, and phthalates, right? So we might say, where do these things come from? Well, as you can see, these are on the list of what's polluting us today. So pesticides, these are pesticides as well as herbicides, fungicides, and insecticides. They're commonly in conventional farming. And what are they used for? They're for keeping unwanted pests, weeds, fungus, and more things away from our food crops. But these chemicals literally penetrate these conventional crops to their core. And then where do those get passed on to? you're right, they get passed on to our body, and our body's starting to get filled up with these toxins, right? Number 2 on that list was mold. Mold is a fungus that comes in various forms, right? There's black mold that's very toxic and harmful to the human health, but many people are sensitive to other types of molds too. And here in the Northwest, we tend to have some moisture, and so molds tend to be here more. But these start to affect our longevity, our health, and the way that our bodies react, right? Then number 3 is heavy metals. So these are low dose exposures over time that start to create a bigger problem for us. So I'm going to just jump out of one of these here so that I can move into and show you guys one of these pieces. So this, okay. Oh, actually, I don't have that pulled up, so I won't go into that right yet. But there's many different things that are affecting us within these areas. So let's go over some ideas of where we get some of these heavy metals from, right? So we get these from amalgam fillings. So these can come from lead-based paints, from tap water contamination, fish with mercury in them. So, right, what we know is that the bigger the fish, the more toxicity there's going to be. So if they're short-lived fish like sardines, like anchovies, very low in their toxicity. If we have fish that eat other fish like shark, swordfish, those kind of things, they're higher in toxicity because they bioaccumulate, right? Tuna is a big fish, so there's a lot of toxicity, a lot of mercury in those fish. Salmon, the most healthy fish that you can eat, salmon, sockeye salmon, because they're vegetarian, so they don't bioaccumulate. They also come in herbal medicines that are tainted, dinnerware that's not been appropriately coated, working in factories that use heavy metals. So the next thing that we see is the VOCs, right? The VOCs, these can be in paints and lacquers, paint strippers, cleaning supplies, pesticides, building materials, office equipment such as copiers and printers. They can be in our carpets, they can be in our beds. It's one of the reasons why we stopped really recommending Tempur-Pedic beds as often, because they need to off-gas for usually up to a month for these VOCs to not be contaminating our lungs. Over time, they're okay. A bed we call we don't call it, but it's called the IntelliBed, is made of surgical grade plastic and rubber that doesn't have any off-gassing. And so that's one that we recommend. Permanent markers, photographic solutions, these kind of things. Chlorine. Chlorine is something that is fantastic because it helps keep our water clean. But the problem is that chronic exposure to low doses of chlorine is going to impact our microbiome. So exposure can be from chlorinated showers, swimming pools, ingesting chlorinated tap water, impacting your oral and gut microbiome health. So what do we do about that? Because it needs to be in our water to keep it clean. Well, getting a good filter, getting a reverse osmosis filter that's mineralizing your water, right? But avoid the leading common, one of the common things that we can avoid easily is just by getting a filter and filtering some of that chlorine out of your water. BPA, right? BPA, this has come on in the last several years. We've seen a lot talked about with this. And so this used to be in almost all plastics, but the good thing is this revolution has caused BPA-free plastics to come out. Now, we don't know what else is in those plastics, so I don't know if we want to say they're safe, but they don't have BPAs. The problem with BPAs is they have estrogen mimicking properties that lead to estrogen dominance and negatively influences many of the functions, including our thyroid gland, our energy levels, cell repair, fetal development, a lot of these different things that we start to see with BPA poisoning. And we're seeing it when they started testing in people's urine. They're seeing it in breast milk. So that means kids are getting it as they're being born. Oxybenzones, right? This is one of the most common ingredients and the most common active ingredient in sunscreen. So this is over 75% of sunscreen. So be careful read what's happening in your sunscreen and the things that you put on your skin. The oxybenzone is known to be an endocrine disruptor, right? And this means it interferes with the production and operation of hormones. So hormones help with a variety of functions, right? Anywhere from reproduction to the way that we feel on a day-to-day basis. So we want to make sure that we understand what we're putting onto our skin. Number 8 is fluoride. So fluoride being coated on our teeth to help strengthen our teeth, maybe that's a good thing because it creates some strength, but it's being put into many people's tap waters. Again, this is something that we can filter out. Fluoride is dangerous. It's a neurotoxin when it's ingested. So we don't want to be ingesting fluoride, but the FDA, the EPA has deemed it to be safe in certain levels in our water. So we want to make sure that we're getting a good clean water filter and then making sure that we're avoiding some dental products that have fluoride on them. Parabens, right, are a group of compounds that preservatives in pharmaceuticals and cosmetic products. So these are good in the way that they stop the growth of fungus and bacteria, but they damage microbes. The food products that contain parabens for preservations are things like beer, soft drinks, desserts, sauces, jams, frozen dairy products, processed vegetables, some of these kind of things that you may not have thought of. Yes, we can look on our cosmetics and see if they have anything that ends in paraben, right? So there's benzyl paraben, there's butyl paraben. Sorry, I was reading that one. Or methyl paraben. So anything that ends with paraben is something that's going to be tough on us. We also want to be looking for something called phthalates. And they are really in plastics and PVC plastics. You want to look for a label that says that it's phthalate free, right? So avoid products packaging that say recycling code number 3, because these often contain BPA and phthalates. So buy things in organic packaging, glass jars. One big thing that you want to be careful of is when you're buying tomatoes, tomato sauce, diced tomatoes, because they're very acidic. So if they're in cans, then you're going to be leaching things that are built into that can. Oftentimes they're coated with BPA. So glass jars is a great way to be looking at those things, okay? Okay, so let's move on to the next one. But one of the things that I like about this page that I put together is the graphic on the left side, right? Is your bucket overflowing? And we're gonna dive into this in just a moment, because this overflowing bucket of these toxins really start to create a bigger issue. So dementia, right? There is a massive change in what's happening with our foods. Since 1996, our foods have been slowly switching over to many GMOs that we have, right? The GMOs that we have, these are going to be higher in pesticides and herbicides. If you've heard of glyphosate, right? Glyphosate is something that we're seeing increase and really get into groundwaters everywhere. So glyphosate, if you look onto the graphic that I have here, it's a simple cheeseburger with French fries. Sorry about that. Cheeseburger with French fries and a drink, right? But look at what's in this. Wheat that's desiccated with Roundup. Roundup is what glyphosate is. We also have GMO soy proteins as a filler. We've got GMO canola oil that maybe the fries are deep fried in. Potatoes desiccated with herbicides, and cows fed GMO corn and soy. One thing that I want you to remember is you are what you eat, but you're also whatever your food ate as well. This can be the plants, because the plants are always eating, and if they're getting glyphosate pulled up, even if it doesn't kill them, right? Like for example, soybeans. Soybeans, if they're non-organic, they are typically GMO. And what that means is that we can spray them with all the glyphosate, all the Roundup that we want. And guess what? The plants don't die, but guess what? It goes into the matrix of that cell. If you look at the graphic on the upper left corner here, this talks about the glyphosate use on corn and soy, the increase of that, but this also puts it together with senile dementia. So this is a correlation graph that a doctor out of the MIT put together. You can see as we started to increase our number of GMOs or glyphosate that's sprayed on our crops, dementia has been going off of the charts. So this is a huge a huge issue that's going on. So now we also have, and I'm not sure what happened when I started playing our slideshow for some of the wording that's going on here. But what we see is we don't insult our intelligence is what I wrote here. Because in 1998, we started saying the scrap dental amalgam material was declared as hazardous material by the EPA. So these are the silver fillings that are in our mouth, right? Fortunately, very few dentists use these anymore. This is awesome for their health, but especially for the health of the people who got these put in. I'm a kid of the 70s and 80s, and so when I had a cavity, that's what got put in my mouth. They have mercury, they leach into our bodies, and what happens is when they're in our mouth, they're okay. But as soon as the dentist removes them from your mouth, right, then now they're considered as a neurotoxin. They have to be specially handled so that they are disposed of in a proper way. So a study presented in the prestigious FASAB indicates that the more amalgam fillings present in your mouth, the more mercury you will have in your organs, including the brain, kidneys, heart, and the liver. We'll talk about the result of this in a moment. Is your bucket overflowing? This is one of my favorite graphics, and it is because it talks about how thoughts, traumas, and toxins and infections start to affect the way that our body is working, right? There's over 450 million people who suffer from neurologic disorders. The majority of those people, we don't have a reason why they got sick. We're pointing back to toxicity on many of these because what we know is that our body has a bucket. Our body's able to detox relatively quickly and detox from many things, but the world has more toxicity in it. And as a result, what we're starting to see is a lot of these just random symptoms, body signals that are showing up, right? So if this is inflammation, you look on here, there's high or low blood pressure, digestive issues, fatigue, brain fog, headaches, many of the things that I mentioned in the beginning. But if you think of your body as this bucket, when you get into a car accident, it injures or fills this bucket more because your body's releasing chemicals. When you lose a whole lot of weight, right, our body holds our toxins in our fat cells. So this is where we can actually get a dump so people can get to a point where they're losing weight, and then all of a sudden they stop and they have really a fat loss break where they're not able to get over certain plateaus. Oftentimes that's an indicator that you're highly toxic. So is your bucket overflowing, right? We look at the three evil amigos of most disease in the modern day world, right? Number one is metals. So these are amalgams, vaccines. They come from personal care products, our parents, where we live and where we work. One of the things that we know is that metals are passed down from mother to child, especially lead. We'll see almost exact amounts of lead going from mother to child. And let's face it, most of us were in the lead generation, or at least our parents were. So a lot of us still have high levels of lead. It takes 3 generations for that to really detox out of our system, unless we're intentional about being able to do that. Number 2 is mold, right? So mold mixed with metals. So mold can be in our home, work, schools, etc., especially in the Northwest. And then number 3 is hidden infection. So Lyme disease is on the rise. We're seeing more of it. And why is this? Well, these are opportunistic infections. And so what happens with these opportunistic infections is when your body has more toxicity, then you get affected more. I think a really good example of this is when we're looking at something that is relevant to today. So when we're looking at a virus, the COVID virus, right? We know that if the host is stronger, then it affects them less, right? So we always try and focus on making sure that the body, that you are as strong as you can be, because infections, whether it's viral or bacterial, are opportunistic. And when they're opportunistic, all that means is that the weaker your body is, the more easily they're going to take seat and have a bigger impact on what's going on with you. So I believe that our children are especially in trouble with this because of the glyphosate and how that's just amplifying that toxicity. You know, they're finding glyphosate or Roundup in all groundwater. So in groundwater around California, almost every wine, even organic wines, are showing signs or showing levels of glyphosate, or as it's known readily, Roundup, right? So what we're going to talk about next is what you need to detox. So there's a difference between a cleanse and a detox. Cleanses are great. They help with the downstream organs. So our downstream organs would be like our liver, our kidney, our gut, our colon. And these things are kind of the downward gradient. They're the end range of where things are getting taken care of, right? But the problem with cleanses, and one of my mentors puts this beautifully, he said that cleanses are kind of like the street sweepers that go down your road, right? In the summertime, you see those street sweepers going by, and they look like, I can't remember, was it Linus in Charlie Brown, who carried the blanket and always had this cloud of dust following him around? That's what those street sweepers look like. So when you're detoxing, that's kind of what, or when you're cleansing, that's what's happening. You're getting rid of some of these toxins that are in those end organs, but it also stirs your body up or stirs some of those toxins up. And as it stirs them up, what we start seeing is some of those toxins getting reabsorbed into our system. So what we're going to talk about next is we're going to talk about how the cellular healing really happens, right? So this is where the true cellular detox really comes in. So what you're seeing on your screen right now is my picture of a cell. I usually like to draw this, and I have my whiteboard right here, so I might jump into that and so that you can understand what I'm going through here. But if we look at the phospholipid bilayer around the cell, okay, these are made of fats. If we're eating fats from French fries and we're eating these fats that are not healthy for us, that lipid bilayer becomes less permeable. The permeability of that cell is incredibly important because we need to get the good stuff in, right, here, and the bad stuff out, right? Inside, we have our DNA, we've got the ATP. So the ATP is being created by our mitochondria. ATP is the energy that our body uses for anything and everything that we do. So think about the mitochondria as little generators of energy. Now they kind of have an output of energy because, you know, just like a fire, when it burns and gives us energy of heat, but it also gives smoke, right? It puts off smoke. So there is a byproduct to the energy that's being formed. What happens is as we become more toxic, not only do we not feel well, but the reason we don't feel well is that the outside layer, the outside edge of our cell starts to get cellular inflammation. So when I'm going to talk about inflammation from here forward, I'm not going to be talking about the inflammation in our knee or our elbow or our shoulder or any of the joints, right? I'm going to be talking about cellular inflammation. When we get cellular inflammation, this is when, let me just get this right here. So if we have the cell, can you guys see this? Okay, so there's my cell. The cellular inflammation basically gets on the cell and makes it so that cell is less permeable to the good stuff coming in and the bad stuff going out. So now we start getting these things that are being trapped, right? So now we start getting kind of like, if you think of the fire analogy again, smoke kind of gets caught inside the cell. A way to help your body detox better is to make sure that that cell is healthier, right? Because once that cell gets this inflammation on it, we have things like hormones, right? We have hormones, say T3 or thyroid, that's trying to get in. And there's little docking stations all around that cell. So if you look at some of these areas, so these little guys, they kind of look like swimming sperm, I guess. These guys are the gateway to get into the cell. So if we see estrogen or thyroid or testosterone or cortisol or insulin trying to connect here, then if that cell wall is not very permeable, they don't get in as easy. So we can actually start having where our blood test shows that we have plenty of our hormone in our blood, but it's not getting into the cell. So we're actually not being able to formulate and utilize that. So we want to make sure and understand that the good stuff needs to go in, the bad stuff needs to go out. There's this constant flow. And as soon as we start to get that cellular inflammation, that stops happening. If we're just doing cleanses, it doesn't take care of the cellular inflammation. It takes care of the downstream so our body can get rid of some of the toxins more easily. But once we have that cellular inflammation, it's hard for our body to start to open that up. So how do we get some of the cellular inflammation? Well, we get it from the foods that we eat, from the environment that we're in, all the things that we've talked about up until now, right? But there's some easy things to do, and we talked about this last month, the dirty dozen, right? The dirty dozen are the foods that you never want to eat non-organic. These are the things that are the most contaminated with herbicides and pesticides. So what you're seeing here, these are the dirty dozen up on your screen. Sorry, I went past that. And so what this does for us is it really doesn't allow us to be as healthy as possible. So there's also, good for all of us, the Clean 15. So the Clean 15, these are the items that you can have non-organic. On this one, I would for sure take off the sweet corn, because sweet corn is now mostly GMO'd. So I would put the sweet corn onto, and I believe that's what the asterisk is here, is making sure that it's non-GMO. So it doesn't need to be organic, but it does need to be non-GMO. Same thing with the papaya. So that's what we're seeing those positions for. So dirty dozen, clean 15. The number one thing we always want to do is remove the source. We want to remove the source of our toxicity. So what is real detox? And if this is right, why is it the answer? Well, I estimate that 98% of heavy metal detox is not effective and 50% of it's not safe. So oftentimes the binders that we use don't bind onto these metals for long enough to excrete them all the way out of our system. This is what happens with chlorella. Chlorella can really help a lot of people feel good, but then after you've been taking it for a while, it starts to retox or starts to get those toxins back into our system. Herbal heavy metal detoxes, they're not true binders, so they just start to stir up some of these. Citrus pectin is not a true binder. Glutathione protects the cell in the brain, but is not great for metals, right? Liquid and powdered zeolites, these are things that go in and they connect onto some of these toxins, but if you don't use the right ones, the zeolites themselves can have a lot of toxicity in them. Cilantro is not safe because it doesn't bind super hard. IVDMPS and EDTA are not safe, and oral DMSA is not safe when taken improperly. So these last two are really good binders, but they need to be taken every 8 to 10 hours because there's a half-life. And if we don't, then we start to get retoxification. So we look at the three components of cellular healing. This is on the graphic here, right? So R1 is removing the source, right? And then we want to regenerate the cell membrane. We want to get that cell membrane so it's as healthy as possible. Then we want to restore cellular energy. We want to get the mitochondria so they're starting to produce energy the way they're supposed to. And then we want to reduce that cellular inflammation and then reestablish methylation pathways. The second thing we want to do is open support and detox pathways. And then number 3 is use a true binder so that we can excrete or get rid of those toxins. And we do that in 3 phases, right? The prep phase, the body phase, and the brain phase. So that's where we work on all of these. So let's talk about some detox treatments. Number 1 is lifestyle change. So you want to make sure that you're thinking about the clean 15 and the dirty dozen. Avoiding the dirty dozen and adding the clean 15. Those are the things that are going to help get your body moving and starting to detox on its own. Cleanses, right? Doing a 5-day, 10-day, 20-day cleanse where we clean up our eating, we change some of our eating habits and try and stick with those, because anything where we start to clean up our diet is going to be better than what we were doing beforehand. True cellular detox, that's what TCD is. That's where we mix dietary changes along with supplementation and vitamins and minerals and support and things that are literally going to grab onto those heavy metals, to the mold toxins, and start to pull them out of your system, right? The different phases, so the prep phase is the goal is to prepare the cellular and downstream pathways for detox. The body phase, the goal is to set up a concentration gradient to allow the deeper stores of metals to mobilize. And then the brain phase, the goal is to remove the metals from the deeper tissues which is where the real problem lies. So what I'm going to be talking about next is really just what the true cellular detox is. We have other detoxes that are, I think it's a 21-day detox that helps with cleaning up your diet, and it's fantastic. But again, it's not getting into what a lot of people need. So what I always suggest is talking to us about what might be right for you. In general, I recommend True Cellular Detox for detoxing. So this is a way that you can get started with that. But I think the biggest thing I want you all to take away from this is to understand that we are living in a toxic world. There is a way to detox, and it's something that you have to be mindful of all the time. And each and every year that goes by, our world's becoming more toxic. So we need to pay more attention to what's going on and allow ourselves to be healthy. Because what do we talk about in chiropractic at Energize? That subluxations or misalignments in the spine are caused by three things: physical, chemical, and emotional stress. So the three T's. So thoughts, traumas, and toxins. So the toxins are what we're talking about. So toxins affect you on a cellular level, but they're also going to cause your spine and your nervous system to be under stress as well. So you get a 2 times effect by taking care of these at the root cause, okay? So what we're looking at is the True Cellular Detox is a system. It's 90 days where there is some dietary alterations that you make, and then there are supplements that you take. The pictures are on the boxes that you see here. So the prep phase, body phase, and brain phase, it's pretty easy to go with. It's a great price to be able to get into a True Cellular Detox over a 90-day period. There are a website that's got the back end in it that teaches you the things that you need to do. So it really holds your hands and walks you through that. And then we have a Facebook group that you can join to ask questions that I curate and make sure that you have an understanding of exactly what you can do during